if you have the ability like you do, like I do, and the willingness to go out and help, is just put yourself out there and have these conversations, because one conversation could save a life. Just giving one person hope. Welcome to the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. I'm Mark Aylward.
I'm Jim Gurley. Thanks for being here.
This podcast is a space for men to have real, raw, and often difficult conversations to help guide middle-aged men through making hard decisions in life. Both Jim and I are mentors focused on leading consciously. Tune in every week to have honest and often humorous discussions on well-being, personal growth, and professional development.
Enjoy the show.
My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Jim Gurley. And today's episode, we're going to talk about health as an issue. And I don't just mean physical health. I mean mental health and emotional health and spiritual health, all the potential subcategories of this topic of health. And I think, I believe myself to be a healthy guy. And Jim, I think you think the same of yourself. Let's talk about what that means and why maybe we pay more attention to that than the average guy, if that's not a stretch. And I identified in a previous, in another podcast episode, as an athlete, and I think you identify as well, at least in part. It's part of who we are. And I think so. I started this health journey pretty early, and my mom was ahead of the curve. I mean, she was talking about vitamin C and Linus Pauling, way back in the 70s. And we ate really well. We had a little garden in the back. Most of what I ate, my mother cooked. We didn't have sugared cereal or soda pop or any of that stuff in our house. And I didn't know that was as unique as it was until later on when I was able to reflect back. So I was kind of gifted, if you will, some decent habits and some awareness that a lot of people probably aren't gifted. And that was kind of start for me. And as a middle-aged man, my body doesn't do what it used to do. No one's does. And I think that the danger is in middle age is to say, okay, well, some of this stuff is breaking down. Some of the stuff is shifting. Like I had to stop playing basketball, and I had to stop jogging, and I replaced those with yoga, breathing, exercise, meditation, walking, swimming in the ocean. You don't have to stop exercising, right? You can shift and change. And we'll get into some more stuff involving mental and emotional health. But Jim, what's your experience been with your physical health, and what has happened over the last few years as you've kind of nestled into middle age?
Yeah, I think if to start off with health, you almost have to break it down into the mental health, physical health, and emotional health. They're all connected and completely related, yet the activities are slightly different. But yeah, that's part of our name, right? It's imperfect because we're all imperfect. That's part of health, is constantly trying to be better and recognizing that you're never perfect. There's no such thing. And it's men. It's unique to men at different stages of their life. And it's a club. So you go to a health club to get fit, but sometimes you need a mental club in order to get the mind in the right place. And then the emotion comes with that. But there's no question that you mentioned yoga, something I recently got into. Definitely one of those guys was just like, no way, I'm not doing that shit. That's weird, And but if you break it down, what is it? It's breathing, right? It's stretching the muscles into places that normally don't get stretched, that are connected with your breath and your breathing and your whole body. So it's working together. That's what yoga is doing. It's stretching, but it's tying it together and breathing. So when it comes down to it, it's really three basic things. It's your breathing, your water intake, and your body, of how much it's in line with the earth. That's the emotional connection, and the alignment of your body in the rest of your spine, neck, back, and all that. So yeah, we'll kind of go from there, but there's a lot of areas we can go with it. But talk about your yoga and when you took that up and why you do it and how's it affected your health in general?
Yeah, I think so the evolution of that was my eldest daughter is a yoga instructor. She's certified. And
Oh,
my middle daughter is a practitioner. Both of them are athletes, and they started doing yoga years ago. And very early on, they would nudge me and say, "Dad, you got to try this. You got to try this. You got to try this." And just like you, I'm like, "I'm a man. I'm not doing yoga." And
mhm.
like that's such a stupid thing to say in hindsight. But you know, I was a locker room guy like you. I sweating and lifting weights and you know contact and rough and tumble and competition. And yoga's not about competition. Yoga's about relaxation and meditation and becoming you know still and with breath work. So I come home. I told this empty nest story. I come home and all of a sudden I'm alone and I can't run anymore. You know, I'm a pretty big guy. My father used to say runners aren't 6'4", you know, 235 pounds. You should find something else to do because that's rough on the body. So I wasn't listening to all these signals, and some time went by. And this day I came home and I was empty. I said, you know, I got some choices to make. It really hit me like a brick. And I'm like, I don't want to be a fat old dude. That is not acceptable. I'm not buying new clothes as I get fatter. That's not happening. And so I started looking around for yoga studios and I found them all of them to be smaller, darker, and kind of softer than I liked. And then I found the YMCA and I walked into the YMCA here in Orlando. It's a beautiful place. And I saw basketball being played and I saw weights being lifted and I saw dudes sweating and I saw the locker room and then I went up to the yoga room and it was this beautiful wooden floor and three of the walls were all windows and outside the windows on the second floor were sun and palm trees. And I'm like, this is the place. I mean, it clicked. And then the second piece of it was there were probably 6 or 7 instructors that rotated in different classes. And what I did was I took a class with each of them. And I found, and this was very important for me, that 2 or 3 of them really resonated with me. And 4 or 5 of them, I didn't enjoy the experience at all. So to me, if I had advice to give to a middle-aged guy that was trying to find a place to exercise, but wasn't wrecking the joints, I would say look around and don't give up if the first instructor is not someone that resonates with you because there's someone out there that does. And it's very important. The environment was important to me, and the coach, the teacher, the instructor makes a huge difference. So I've enjoyed yoga for over 3 years now, and my flexibility is better than it was 20 years ago. And I evolved with my girlfriend into an exercise that's yoga like. It's called the 5 Tibetan Rites, Rites. And if anybody's interested, just Google it, Wikipedia, whatever you need to do. And you'll find it's 5 exercises that are all kind of stretching and yoga like. And you do 21 repetitions of all 5. And then you do a short breathing exercise and it takes about 15 minutes, which I love because yoga took me an hour. And I don't mind the hour, but if you can stay fit in 15 minutes, that's cool. And then I walk with her and alone 4 or 5 times a week. I do a 4 mile route around the lakes here outside in the sun. And then we've also adopted the Wim Hof breathing method, which is the one we do is an 11-minute exercise in the morning. And I got my 92-year-old dad doing that. He loves it. It's these are really efficient, really fun, really fitness oriented, but also kind of emotionally and spiritually satisfying as well. And that's kind of my routine. And I've maintained my weight pretty much. Probably could lose a couple pounds, but I didn't buy any new clothes, and I intend to do these things or things like them for the rest of my life.
Yeah, mine's a little more knuckleheadish. I, I think I tried a couple yoga classes, but it didn't register. But when I was in Florida, actually, the when I came out to visit with you, I took a class and we did it outside. It was a supposed to be a class, and it ended up be just the instructor. She was fantastic. Her name's Jennifer, and it was yoga outside, which was an experience. And I learned a lot from her because it's the breathing as much as it is the meditation, as much as it is the body. And she explained to me how what you're really trying to do is get as close to earth as you can. So doing yoga outside actually is good because you're close to the ground. And then it's of course the alignment of the spine in relationship to your breathing, and it's all connected all together. So it was good. But also as an athlete, because I played high school football and a little bit of college football, and then rugby. But fitness was always for a performance. I had an event, I should say, a competition on that Saturday, and if I wasn't physically fit, then that would affect the outcome of that. So as I started lifting, obviously high school typical weightlifting training program, but as I was playing rugby and was moving up from Division 2 to Division 3, Division 2, and then Division 1, um, in order to compete at that level, I had to increase the strength and conditioning. And I'm far from your height of 6'4", so my edge was always I can out train somebody, and my strength would come from the conditioning. So that's when diet became a big part of it, and strength and weight conditioning and running. Um, but today, yeah, it's a combination of mixing it up between riding my bike. Fortunately, I have a home gym, and that's paid off during COVID. But changing, really getting away from the basic strength movements and mixing that up between stretching made a big difference, especially as our bones age. The aches and the pains, particularly related to computer. Your neck is in one position the entire day. My right arm hurts a lot because of the mouse. Um, it's made a big difference. But let's break it down, Mark. Let's get into these different areas of health and even the mental health, because it's easy to tell somebody, hey, just go to the gym if you want to feel better, but there's a reason why they don't go to the gym, or we don't. What do you think the most common uh, resistance to just going out and eating better? And by the way, one other thing that is probably the most important thing, if anybody ever asks me about fitness, I'll say, if you have a choice between going to the gym or eating a healthy meal, eat the healthy meal, skip the gym, because your diet is directly related to your health. And that's a tough one, because depending how you were raised, depending on who you live with or who you don't live with, it really is the food that you're buying at the grocery store and then you bring home and eat. And I can't say enough about the diet. And then hydration. It's everybody knows it, but not everybody does it. And that's constantly being hydrated and drinking. And then, but breathing, I had no idea how important um, breathing is, and oxygen. Often, especially with anxiety, that's what the brain automatically does. It has short breaths. It's not breathing. It's not taking the air in and letting it out. And these are the things, especially at a high level of performance, that if you're, whether it's business or whatever you're doing, to perform at your very highest, you're going to have to deal with your health. Otherwise, your body is just going to shut down and not be able to give you the output that you want.
Yeah, I think in my experience, the biggest complaint as to why people don't exercise or eat well, particularly exercise, is time. And they claim to not have enough time. And I joke with my friends that use that excuse. It's like, yeah, how much time did you spend on Facebook today? How much time did you spend watching TV today? How much
Mhm.
time did you spend just sitting around doing nothing? And I think the couple of suggestions that I would make is I am more effective when I get my exercise in first thing in the morning, because then it's done and it sets me up for the rest of the day. And if I wait until the end of the day, it's much easier to go, I'm tired, fuck that, I'm not doing that. The other thing that I see a lot of is that this fad kind of thing, the diet. Like I don't believe in diets, right? I think diets
Yeah,
are
I feel the same way.
yeah, I think they're bullshit, because you're basically asking yourself to do something that's contrary to your instincts, and that's just a losing game. I think that I would vote more for, let's talk about a lifestyle. Like you say, you ride a bike, right? You ride a bike because you enjoy riding a bike. You enjoy
No,
the
I actually I
experience.
don't enjoy it. I find well, kind of a mountain bike, street bike. I find the steepest hill, and there's a lot of them right where I live, and I just go up the hill, 100% fitness.
Yeah,
I don't enjoy riding my bike,
that's interesting.
but I do it solely for the fitness side of it, and because I can't, I had knee surgery when I was playing rugby, so you have to really listen to your body, especially at this stage. Injuries often come from either in the gym or doing things that your body just doesn't want to do. So you have to constantly be listening to it. And so when I realized that running was going to be a problem because my knee would swell up the next day, then I just said, okay, I'll use a bike.
You have a level of commitment to fitness. I think that's somewhat unique. I think I have it too, but I don't want to lose track of my last thought. I think it's interesting that you don't enjoy the bike riding experience. I wonder how long you'll continue to do that, or seek out something else. I personally think one of the other reasons people don't work out is they're doing things they don't like to do. And so I spent a lot of time, as it sounds like you have too, looking for things that I actually enjoy doing too. And I enjoy doing yoga. I enjoy walking because I like being outside, but I also have a place where I can walk that's beautiful. There's trees and lakes and birds, and it's very, very pleasant. And I always laugh when I see people in the gym in Florida when it's 75 degrees outside and sunny. I'm like, why are you inside? Why aren't you moving around outside? But I think that fitness routines come to an end, and diets come to an end because they're not enough about a lifestyle. They're not part of a lifestyle. They're a forced routine, and then you lose a little bit of weight, and you see it all the time. And I don't think losing weight is a good thing to pursue. I think you pursue fitness and you'll get to the correct weight. Losing weight just for the sake of losing weight could possibly be very unhealthy. But I also think the same is true of eating well. There's this kind of assumption that it's two things. It costs a lot of money to buy organic food, and it doesn't taste good. And the first piece used to be true, but I don't believe it is anymore, because that's all I buy. Is 90% of what I eat is organic, and it's not any more expensive than, and sometimes less expensive, because it's been made more readily available and it's more common, and more demand creates more supply, and so on and so forth, brings the prices down. I didn't think of this until just now. I think one of the links we'll drop in the notes is a link to my daughter's cookbook. She's a nutrition coach, and she created a cookbook full of recipes and beautiful pictures that everything in there is spectacularly delicious. And it's gluten free, soy free, dairy free, sugar free. And you'd be amazed at the kind of food you can make that tastes really good, that's just going to feed you energy. Because to your point, and I think I've heard this before, 90% of getting to a healthy place has to do with what you put in your body,
Yep.
not exercise,
Yeah,
you know.
no question. And I'm glad you mentioned let's loop back to my comment about how I don't enjoy riding a bike. What I enjoy is the feeling afterwards. And that you could say I enjoy it. Of course I enjoy it because it feels really good when you're done. But when you're pushing yourself that hard, and I still do because it's a steep hill and it's hard, there's a sense of accomplishment. Your body is, when you're pushing it, that it's releasing a lot of built up stuff that you need to get out of your body. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. When I say I don't like it, of course I like it. I wouldn't continue to do it if I don't. I like the feeling after, and that's often when people think that they have to like working out. You have to like the way it makes you feel, not pushing your body. It's resistance. Your body doesn't is telling you, no, I don't like this, because you're pushing it beyond what it wants to go. But that's everything in life, and your body will tell you that. So that's a sign of the resistance, and that's what strength and conditioning is. It's what all is. But how about mental health?
Well, I think there's so many thoughts I have on mental health. I don't think I've ever experienced depression, and I don't think I've ever been in a state of mental illness. So I cannot be empathetic with regard to that. I do, however, have experience with very good friends and family that have experienced anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. So I've seen it close, and it's a caveat, whatever you want to call it. I know that there is a severity in all mental illness that is not going to be fixed by listening to this podcast. You need to see a doctor, you need to be on meds. And real depression and suicidal thoughts, that's another thing entirely. That's not what we're talking about. If you're in that boat, get some help, and get some help from somebody who's qualified to help you. That's some serious shit. And it's getting worse in this world because of social media, and because of disconnection, and because of COVID, and all of the uncertainty that creates. So that's a caveat that I think is extremely important to mention here. Organic food's not going to fix that, right? So
Yeah,
be
Mark,
clear.
and I appreciate you saying that, because you're right. Mental health is, in my opinion, a degree of anxiety, a frustration turns into an anger, and anger progresses and progresses if it's not dealt with, to the point of depression, and as much as suicide. Right, there's a high rate of suicide right now for guys our age. That's just a real thing. Why that's happening? Environment, and it does tie back to something I've heard a lot about, these different blood tests and these different types of tests. And you can spend all day just taking tests. But I know when I went through the TIP program, it was Kurt. Kurt ran me through a number of tests. You know probably a little bit more about this than I do. Um, and that was identifying what's in your body so that you can adjust your diet, or at least be aware of it. And there's a lot of that going on at the moment. In my case, I eat 6 times a day. Um, I'm what is I've always ate 6 times a day. I have a very high metabolism. I'm also pre-diabetic, and probably have been my entire life. And I manage it through food. Fortunately, I've never taken a single pill for diabetes, and I don't plan on doing that, because I believe you can manage your blood sugar level with a proper diet. But I have to either carry food with me or eat consistently. And one of the things I learned when I went through the program was I had these certain, I don't know what you call them, chemicals, or something in my blood, or in that they detected. It was part, I was doing a lot of protein shakes. Part of it was my conditioning of an athlete, that I just never stopped. I just continued to do that. But also there was chemicals in some of these proteins, and some of these they weren't supplements, because I don't take any supplements, but I was using protein powders that had ingredients in them that were affecting. Doctor would explain it to me that way, that you're feeling this way because of this. So it's taking this holistic approach to your health. And part of that is, understanding what is in your system. Can you share a little about that, Mark? I think you said you went recently, did some training on the testing, but what goes on in those tests to determine what
Well,
you can
you're
do?
you're 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 referring to the Inspired Performance Institute and Dr. Don Wood, and your experience going through an in-person session with Dr. Wood here in Orlando. And when you're here in Orlando, we also deliver that program online, pre-recorded, as well as we deliver it over a Zoom call. But you have to be in proximity, physical proximity, to our Orlando office to go through the test. It's called an AO scan, and it generates a series of, I think, in excess of 400 markers in your body through vibrational frequency, and the
It's without
analysis.
drawing blood, right?
It's non-invasive. There's no blood
Right.
drawn. You put a headset on your
Yep.
just above your ears, so your skull, where the vibration is most keen. It's all about frequencies, and the frequencies register markers from things like cortisol to blood
Hmm.
pressure to minerals to fat deposits to chakras. Even it's a pretty
Hmm.
magical thing, and
Yeah.
it's a benchmarking test. You look at it before, and then you look at it after, and then Dr. Wood would say something to you like, you might want to check with your doctor about this, because it's a little high. And he doesn't diagnose anything or make any medical recommendations, but he highlights areas that probably are worthy of your attention, and then
Yeah.
leaves it up to you as to what you want to go do or not about it. But
Right. I'm sure you can get these tests, many different locations. I'm sure these tests are readily available, but you're like you said, he's not giving you nutrition advice. He's just saying, hey, this could be affecting the way you feel, and naturally, it's going to affect your emotional well-being as much as your physical. So,
Yeah, I think these things are all tied together, Jim. I know you agree
no
with me, but
question.
if you have not been accustomed to eating real food, I mean, real food, like one ingredient food that's organic, then you don't really know what it feels like. And I've experienced significant emotional and mental benefits from eating good food, right? I mean,
Let's break this down, Mark, because it's almost unfair to tease people with, it sounds easy, but what are the let's just say easiest um, to prepare, um, least expensive, so you're not spending outrageous amounts of money on because it can get very expensive, especially when you get to organics foods. But what are just some available foods that somebody could start to put into their diet immediately that makes them feel better? It's a loaded question. I'll share mine with you,
yeah,
but
well, I
what are
think
some things? I know you're juicing, so share that with us and how
yeah,
that's.
I bought a juicer just a little while ago, a couple months ago, and it's really cool. It's a Breville, Brevel. It's like the Dyson of juicers. It was $150. They used to be 400 or 500 bucks. It's real easy to clean. It's quiet, and you got to use a lot of vegetables and fruit to make a little bit of juice, but it's a lot of fun. And I don't do it every day, but I would highly recommend it. And when you're drinking juice, it's easy to consume as well. You don't have to sit down for a half hour and chew. It's pre-digested, so to speak. That's one thing. The other thing is I make a smoothie every morning. Pretty religious about that, and that's full of really good stuff and superfoods and fruits and vegetables and turmeric and cinnamon and some of these things that increase your metabolism. And that's also, once you make it, you take it with you, and it's a real easy thing to consume. So it's a time saver, really. And it's got a ton of spinach in it, so I'm getting everything I need in one fell swoop if I am not able to eat well later on, or I have to go without for a while. And I used to carry around hard boiled egg because that can buy you an hour of time and let you get to a place where you can consume good food. But I think the smoothie and the juicing and the carrying around a high level of protein source for a snack in case you get caught between meals, those are good kind of shortcuts, cheat moves kind of thing. But I also think one of the coolest things I ever heard was when you go to the grocery store, two things: go around the aisle to the far right, go around the aisle all the way in the back, and go around the aisle all the way to the far left, and stay out of all the other aisles. And you will almost guarantee yourself that you'll only buy good food that's good for you. That's one ingredient. The second thing is, read the ingredients on everything that you buy. And if there's something on there that you have difficulty pronouncing, don't eat it, right? Because it's bad for you 99% of the time. That is a very simple way to get started, right? And if it's in a box or it's in a package of any kind, it's probably not good for you. Now, this isn't 100% true, but it's vast majority of the time. Those are simple things that you could do right away to massively improve the quality of what you're putting in your body.
Yeah, I'll share my hacks because that's what I do. And the way I look at it is it's about efficiency to me and cost. I don't like spending ridiculous amounts of money on food, and I don't like to spend a lot of time preparing it. But and I'm very let's just say consistent or diligent with my diet. Always have been. So I'll start off 5 a.m. As soon as I wake up. First thing I'll do is a large glass of water with apple vinaigrette. It's really important because your body is uh, it's dehydrated while you're sleeping, so you want to hydrate it immediately as soon as you wake up. That's the first thing I do, and I drink it with a straw just because it's a large glass, and that's the what I do. And then I'll have breakfast every morning. I do egg whites out of the carton just because I don't want to crack eggs, and it's just takes a lot of time. So I can prepare egg whites. I'll cut up some onion, parsley, bell peppers, put in there, throw in the microwave for 2 minutes, turn it around, and 2.5 minutes. I have my protein. I pre-cook my oatmeal, so I always do. Um, I like steel oats, and I'll pre-cook that, so I get 4 or 5. Scoop that. That's my and then I put fruit. So I'll cut up a strawberry or mango or something like that. But that's every single morning. I'll eat that um, to kick off the day. But and then all the meals and then I do one in between. Uh, right now, I've been doing a lot of yams and sweet potatoes. That's one of the best foods, and it makes you feel good. It's cheap. You can pre-cook them. Uh, I do some coffee. I'm really backing off from the caffeine. So I'll have a small cup of coffee, and then lunch, it's the same thing. It's either chicken, rice, but balance. You always constantly want to do your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fruits and vegetables. Drink water throughout the day, and then um, dinner, and then that's it. But it's really about efficiencies. I don't eat for taste that often. I eat for the nutritional value, and if I happen to get some flavor in it, which I can with honey on top of the fruit, I can. You can chop up onions. Flavor can come pretty easy with spices, but it's about preparing it and then the consistency of that and the storage of it. So it's yeah, that doesn't fill up your whole entire refrigerator. So,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
think I think those are all sound pieces of advice. One of the other things I do is I don't eat breakfast until usually 11 o'clock, and it's called a mini fast. And if I stop eating around 7 the night before, you get 7 in the morning is 12 hours, and you add another 4 hours onto that, 5 hours onto that, you get to about the 14 or 15 hour between meals. It fires up my metabolism. My metabolism is not as fast as yours, clearly. But I mean, all of these things are making adjustments so these things can fit into your schedule. They can be cost effective. They can taste good, and they can be good for you. Everything
yeah,
Jim just said, I would recommend, and I think everything I said he might recommend as well. You just got to find your place. I mean, I insist on the food tasting good, so I use a lot of spices. I use a lot of organic spices. I use cinnamon. I use turmeric. I use pepper. I use Himalayan pink sea
yeah.
salt.
You get some great flavors
Great
in your
flavors,
food.
great
Yeah,
flavors. I make some really good dishes, and I take a little bit more time with the prep. But I used years ago, I was on a diet that was all vegetable alkaline diet, and that was brutal. I couldn't sustain it, but it was the most effective thing I've ever done to get fit and lose weight quickly. But I didn't find it sustainable because I couldn't spend 4 hours on a Sunday preparing the vegetables for the week.
yeah,
I wasn't willing to do it.
yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned fasting. I've had some friends that just say it's been the best thing I ever did because your body doesn't need to. We do. These are back to cultures too. We are conditioned to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And to your point about fasting, for your body not to have to consume food for that period of time is very natural and very good for your body. Remember, I'm pre-diabetic, so I'm managing my blood sugar level. So it's a little different situation of why I eat so often. It's about maintaining the blood sugar level as much as anything else. It's also very related to the way I my nutrition during the different seasons. Whether it's rugby or football.
I think it's important to say too that everybody's different, right? You've
Yeah.
different metabolism. Men and women need different things. Men need different things at different stages of life.
Yep.
As testosterone levels go down and blood pressure becomes more of a potential issue, or cholesterol or whatever. So again, not medical doctors, not telling you to change everything, but bounce this stuff off somebody who you trust, and
Yeah.
get a collective opinion. And what works for Jim might not work for me. What works for me not what might work for him, because
Yeah, the other thing, Mark, I just realized if you're living alone, it's kind of easier some ways, and it's harder because you don't have anybody else to worry about. But then you also don't have anybody else to worry about, so you end up not eating so good. But there's a lot to do with the person that you're eating with, because if they aren't into eating what you're eating, then there's going to be a problem. You're going to eat what they eat, or they're going to eat what you eat, and there's going to be a conflict. So fortunately, my wife and I are pretty much on the same page. I think she's adapted more to my diet than I have hers, and that's just also how we were raised, right? I mean, we were raised at a time where TV dinners, uh, I had a mom that cooked dinner every night, but I got to say, it wasn't the best food. And breakfast, it tasted good, but it was uncommon to have. I'm but that side of my family is or Italian, Swiss Italian. So you get some of those cultural foods in your diet, but there's a lot of crap back then,
Yeah.
especially in the era that we grew up in. We used to eat macaroni and cheese and
Yep.
a lot of processed stuff, especially the canned foods and that era of shopping grocery stores and the marketing that was going on still affects our generation and how we eat culturally. So that
Dude, when
yeah,
we
let's
were
let's touch on that for a second too. What did you eat when you were a kid, and how does that affect you today? It's easy to sit here and talk about, yeah, let's just go buy organic, and we all get better, but you don't throw away um, traditions uh, in your life as you move into these later years of that. What are your thoughts about what you learned when what would you eat when you were younger, and how
yeah,
that's changed?
Yeah, I was fortunate again. I mentioned this, I think, in another episode. My mom pretty much cooked everything that we ate. We didn't eat a lot of processed foods. We didn't eat a lot of sugar. No sugared cereal. I remember sneaking over to my neighbor, my best friend Ned's house, just to get a ring ding or an Oreo every once in a while, and and we had a little garden outside. And you don't have to be a genius to grow food. I mean, all you got to do is throw seeds into good soil, and try over and try over and try over and throw a bunch of water on it. And when you get the opportunity to pull your own food out of the ground in the backyard, that's fucking cool, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah. If you live in a climate that can support that,
yeah, yeah.
my grandmother would grow her own vegetables, so that was yeah. There's nothing that tastes better in the food and everything about that, but that's not in the cards for a lot of people because they don't even have the
No,
space or
well,
that.
I mean, they've got some pretty cool devices to grow things internally, towers and such. And so, I mean, if you really are interested in that, there's a lot of technology now that makes that a lot easier, and it requires a lot less space. So, but it's just a little bit of investigation. I think it's simpler than a lot of people think, and there are multiple ways to approach it.
So mental health.
This is something that's been talked about a lot lately, a lot more for not the first time in my life, but this COVID thing is turned the world upside down. And I think a lot of people that were never had to deal with mental health issues are having to deal with them now, whether that's my grandmother passed away in a nursing home and nobody spoke to her for a year or was able to say goodbye, and to I am uncertain about my future now to the extent that I can't sleep, or I'm worried about everything. Because I mean, you can take whatever position you want on this COVID thing, but I firmly believe nobody knows what the hell's going on. I think the data's incorrect. I think the people's opinions are wildly inaccurate. And I think the recommendations that are being made by people without any expertise at all, they're just in positions of power, are complete bullshit. So I get some people are scared, and it is a thing. It's a disease, and it's killed some people and it's hurt some people. But the anxiety that this has created, and you on top of that, this lack of human connection that is social media, where you can troll anybody. Like the things you can say to me on social media, you would never say to me face to face, because you'd feel rude, or you'd certainly be held accountable. So this mental health, and the school shootings, to me, not to mix and match, but those aren't about guns. Those are about mental health. Those are people that are mentally ill. The gun's the tool, right? But taking away guns from law-abiding people, you think criminals, you pass more laws, you think criminals are going to pay attention to that? They don't pay attention to laws. Pass all the ones you want. The only people without guns are going to be law-abiding citizens. So that's a real mental health issue. Focus on the horror that is
Yeah.
children being killed, takes away from the issue, which is, how did this person who performed this heinous act of violence get that deep into a school with a gun without anybody ever noticing before that this individual has a screw loose? That's the problem, right? And so if we just dance around addressing symptoms, then mental health, is a topic that needs to be discussed. To your point, it's a real thing.
Well, that's exactly the conversation I wanted to have. And so let's break that down, right? So you're right. You could say to screw loose, but that's a social construct. We as a society have created an individual that is so much in pain that he wants to move his pain from himself and kill people. Uh, why is that? And what can we do to start to get to the core of some of these problems? Because we can't just uh, gloss over that and just throw them into a category of the guy's a Looney Tune, and if we just get rid of those people, the problem goes away. What is going on in society? I think you touched on it, Mark. We have a media that is constantly pushing out fear and division, and this is causing anxiety. And speaking of that, your daughter does a great podcast, I think, on anxiety and how that affects us and our mental health. But let's just talk about why that is. Why are people so worked up where they're committing suicide and they're acting out the way they are? There's a reason for this, and it's an environment that is continues to grow, whether it's our public education, whether it's our workplace, and often even our own homes. So, what do you think it is? What do you? It's an environment that we have
Yeah,
created.
yeah, I think it's a massively complicated issue, right? So not something that anybody could resolve in an hour long podcast, but I think it's worth it. The biggest piece is it's a thing. It's getting worse, and I think that we need to continue to investigate why it's happening and have conversations about why it's happening
Well, let's have that conversation right now. What?
to flush
Why?
out yeah to flush out the ideas to get to the solution. And
Well,
I think Jim, it's the part of it is the breakdown of the traditional family unit, right? And I think when you have, because all of these people doing these shootings are boys, right? They're men, young men. Their girls aren't doing it, right? Which is kind of interesting. There's something probably to be discovered about that. Number two, um, they typically, when the story becomes the full story, you typically find that this boy is from a broken home of some kind, has either no father figure or an abusive father figure, and has not found a replacement in a big brother or a counselor or a guidance counselor or a teacher or a coach. No one else has stepped in to fill that role. And you can come out of that experience a well-adjusted young man, but it can also destroy you and
yeah,
put you in
yeah.
a real dark place.
Well, let's talk about that dark place, because I don't want this to become about the shootings, but we're on a it's a good case study of, to your point, Mark. There is a certain profile that it seems to meet every time, right? And we're learning more about these particularly one in California. It is a typically a young man that feels that he doesn't belong to any group, and he's been rejected often by women. And we also know that there's a pattern in regards to gaming, that we have. There's a generation of young men that are gamers, and shooting things, and this action and all this is just almost becomes part of their subconscious. They don't feel it as people anymore, and then they're so isolated or so lonely that they lose their mind and go out, and that's happened. So there are, maybe to your point about the shootings, because I do want to change subject and not make this all about shootings, but there are patterns of a social construct uh, that they grew up in, that we can absolutely point to that, and we can't lie about the math, right? It's a young man, and I don't know about the childhood thing, because some of them come from decent homes, but they're isolated, or they should say they don't belong to anybody. They don't. They're misfits, or they don't feel like girls like them. Yeah. How do you change that?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I think the other thing that strikes me is I know the kid down in and I'm it's not even a shooting thing. It's more of a systemic issue. I believe that the police were at his home around a complaint 22 times
Hmm. Yeah.
before he did this, and also the school had already made the decision that he wasn't allowed to come onto the campus with a backpack. And my question to you would be, if you're not allowed to come on campus with a backpack, why the fuck are you allowed to come on campus at all? Right? So that's a systemic breakdown either in the educational system or the law enforcement system or the social systems, or all three. And I don't think those get any attention at all. I don't think any, well, maybe somebody has been held accountable for that, but so I think there's the real problem, which is where the solution comes from, right? Getting to the real problem is a foundational systemic problem across three or four different systems: law enforcement, K through 12 education, or maybe K through college, because these happen on college campuses too. And the family unit, the breakdown, the isolation, and the gaming and the social media isolate people. And if you spend all day and all you're doing is spending that time in your own head, anybody's going to be driven mad by that
Yep.
eventually.
Yeah. And going back to those young men, because that's what's what we're talking about. They also have some pretty clear data that they were medicated younger, whether either ADHD, whatever it is, but they were put on medication early on, and something goes wrong in the brain as it's trying to develop when it's on these certain medications. So yeah, there are some pretty compelling um, data points that we could begin to address that. But at the end of the day, it's they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel significant or important, and they do this to be seen and to move their pain onto other human beings. I don't want to get into the let's say the there's clearly some benefits to the women's movement. My daughters have benefited from, my wife have, my sisters. I mean, I'm not at all suggesting that we want to go back to 1950, but I would also say that there is a connection between the focus that a woman can do it all and be it all, uh, and so much less focus on the young man or the young boy, and to a point where they're even discounting them. You know, women have been empowered, and that's great. We need that. That's progress. But there's a cost to everything, right? And there's a cause and effect. What do you think that effect could be having on young men as they try to become men and progress into life?
Well, I think it's a great point. I think that the society is our society in the United States is moving to a place where masculinity is somehow a bad thing, and strong men are somehow dangerous. They certainly can be, but not because they're strong, because they're abusing their power, and something else is wrong. I think when we try to push men down, particularly young boys, with respect to their masculinity or their virility or their toughness, I do think we're doing them a disservice. And I think it creates a weakened state of mental health potentially. So there's, and again, these things to me, these are just worthy of looking into. These to me are, I don't know the answers, but I know when you make this all about the Second Amendment, you're spending your time looking at the wrong things, and you have less time to look at the actual problem. And I'm willing to have the discussion about gun laws and all that other stuff, but it's like we do this with so many different issues. We obfuscate, we change the topic, right? It's like women's rights is what abortion is all about. Well, yes and no, right? It's about other things too. So I just think this situation needs attention, and I think the pharmaceutical component is a whole nother conversation. I think the abuse in the big pharma to doctors to writing prescriptions is so out of hand right now. I mean, if ADHD, I don't think that even existed when we were kids. Did it?
No, I didn't. And
Yeah,
if it did, I would have it all. Like I said,
yeah,
I checked every single box
yeah.
between being dyslexic, ADHD, every single one. But somehow I got through. And you know
Yeah.
how I got through was because I did have some good, I had some bad teachers, but I had some good teachers too that said, you know, he's a little bit not so good in this area, but he makes it up here. And when we became, everybody has to be a straight A student. Everybody has to be the star of the team. I do think we created this category of these kind of throwaway kids. At a certain point, we all have to start to say, where is change made? Change is made locally, not nationally. And everybody wants to talk about what's wrong, but nobody really wants to go in and spend the time um, and learn the problem and then become part of the solution. Everybody wants to sit back on the sidelines or actually in the stands and yell at the players or yell at the coaches for making bad decisions. But I would like to try to talk about what we can do as men. It's a men's club to some degree, right? We're imperfect. We're all imperfect. But what could we do uh, to make a change or to have a conversation with a young man or even ourselves sometimes to sort these things out? Because the isolation um, and loneliness, we've talked about this before, is what is the cause of mental um, health. It's a progression of just frustration, not belonging, and then pretty soon you just lose your fucking mind,
Well, I
and
think
and and you self medicate or you do bad things.
yeah, I
And
think again, these are big issues. I think that what you do is you have a podcast and you talk about it. You go
I
into the
appreciate you saying that. Yeah,
going into the school systems and you give talks and
yeah.
volunteer and with the homeless coalition to play football like I did with the kids on the weekends for a few
Hmm.
years. You invest the time. I feel I said when somebody said that talking about privilege, I said at one, I can't remember the context, but I said I you know what my privilege was? I was loved. That's my privilege, right? Because everything else I was just born with, and I didn't have anything to do with that. So I think love is kindness, awareness. If you have the ability, like you do, like I do, and the willingness to go out and help, is just put yourself out there and have these conversations because you hear all the time. There's one conversation could save a life. You know, just giving one person hope is better than nothing. You know, so and taking a stance. You know, I think that we're also running into a situation now. The world, the federal government, seems to want to tell us what we can say and what we can think and all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm an independent thinker and I always will be. And I'm going to share my opinion. I'm going to do it with grace. I'm going to do it with kindness and with gratitude. But I think your point about the grassroots stuff is completely on point because the problems that are going on in Detroit are different than the problems in Orlando. And the problems in Castleberry are different than the problems in College Park, two towns here locally. So the federal government sticking its hands into this stuff is counterproductive. I think you're throwing a blanket over a country that is mixed race, mixed ethnicity, mixed culture, mixed color, mixed everything, and you're that one blanket doesn't fit over that. So I
Yep.
think we have to push this decision making down to a local level, as you suggested. That's huge.
Yeah, this is what my experience has been, and I had this epiphany that so we grew up with the what was the term, a white picket fence and a mom and a dad, and if everybody was like that, then world all the problems would be solved. And I really changed my perspective on that. In fact, I stopped um, thinking like that, and I remember having conversations with people, and I'd say it's easy for somebody that's never not had anything to say, well, if if they would just do this and they just that, but not everybody has these simple things that we take for granted, like a ride to school, like breakfast in the morning, like a home. And I realized working with a lot of my players that the conditions are so difficult sometimes it's hard to show up. It's easy to show up when you have a peanut butter jelly sandwich and an SUV and a cell phone from when you're 5 years old to when you're 10-year-old, and then you just get dropped off like a Uber service because you were born into a situation where there was an abundance of resources like that, right? Versus a community when they just don't have that. It doesn't mean that they don't love their kids just as much. It's very difficult for them to show up when with all those conditions. And then another thing I realized, I saw some fathers in the home that did far more damage than fathers that were not in the home. So we have to stop having that conversation or that narrative that if everybody had a father, they'd be better off. In fact, often the father was part of the problem in the home. And I'll give an example, because when a young man, particularly in the puberty stage, like 13, 14 years old, he's trying to become a man and he's in the home. You can't have two men in one home. It just doesn't work. So there's at that stage in his life, there's a disconnect between the father and the son, and that secondary role model, whether that's a coach, could be a grandparent, could be an uncle, could be your neighbor. In my case, it was my neighbor. Um, they fill that role, and often they're just reinforcing what your father was doing. And to me, that's the future. I mean, that's the solution to the problem. I do think that we have to start to create communities where they can they feel like they're a part of something and they don't get left out. That's
Yeah, that's local level stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on right now that's like, if this is going to offend some people, but we said we were going to be controversial, we're going to be, candid. If you are born a boy with a penis and you think you are a girl, in my mind, that is a mental imbalance that needs to be addressed. That is not to be addressed with surgery and medication at the age of 7 years old. That is something that, I mean, you can't drive a car until you're 16. You shouldn't have any say in what your gender is. And any parent that is pushing a child to regender, for lack of a better phrase, I think is being an abusive parent. I honestly believe that to be the case. So we have all these mental illness issues that are being called something else, which means we're not addressing them. Again, we're
yeah, this is
dealing
a
with
tough one. Yeah,
it is a tough one. There's no
it's a tough
question
one
it's a
because
tough one.
I remember in high school, particularly even grammar school and before that, there were certain guys that just you could tell were slightly different.
Yep.
And as time went on, they had a different sexual preference. So I'm not suggesting that they were. I think the extreme case is when you're changing gender. You know, that to me is a conversation I don't even want to have right now, because it's so to your point, unfair to mutilate a young person's body before they've had time to really play that on their own. But I do believe, especially growing up in the Bay Area, that some people just are born with a different sexual preference, and that's something that I don't know if it's genetic or, but I do think you're just kind of born that way. You can see the personality from that point on. But
See, I think that's a different topic, right? Sexual
yeah,
preference versus sexual identity. I think those are different topics. And so again, we have a tendency when we talk about these quote unquote controversial issues to not want to face the reality of the situation. I mean, look at what's happening, and this is a tangent, but in this area of sports where men are transgendering and competing in women's sports, who thinks that's going to end well?
yeah, and those are, and the media is very good at taking those stories and making that the, the conversation, and taking the 0.5% to make it the way it is. And then this is where I would like to see more people push back on that, and not even engage the conversation. It sure may be a trend, and sure that the way it looks like that's it is, but we're focusing way too much on the 1%, and then making it all about the 99%, making about the 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just unfair to the rest of the population. You see this with a lot of these movements. Um, and it's what I think it's a breakdown in leadership. There's no question, in government, because the math doesn't add up and people start to question everything. And that to me is the biggest problem growing, is when the media and even our politicians grandstand and then pander to these different issues that distracts from the big issue. So
Yep.
the 99%, so it's that whole mentality. The teacher punishes the entire class for one jackass, and yet the rest of the class is saying that at a super, and they're like that's fucked up. Or everybody starts to focus on the 1%. and we forget about the 99%. I
Yeah.
hope that we start having that conversation and challenging corporate leaders, especially corporations that pander to these issues just because it's what the flavor of the month. Even like this MLB thing in Atlanta, that's disappointing.
It's so much more than disappointing. And I just heard that the Major League Baseball Association just signed a contract with China on top of it all.
Yeah, they are, and I don't have our self-interest. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark. They're trying to sell us shit. That's what the media is doing. They don't have our best interest in mind. We have to either stop listening to it or stop buying those products.
Yeah.
But is that right? It's
disgusting to me. And, but I think to stay in the mental and emotional health space, I think that mental illness is a thing, right? Emotional well-being or lack thereof is a thing. The issues that the self-worth and loneliness and anxiety, these are social constructs that are bigger than anything we ever saw as
but
kids.
They're part of those things that they're not. We can't, in my opinion, Mark, we can't separate them. They're a progression. It is a degree of that. They're related. You
know where I think, and I don't disagree with you, but you know where I think that we dropped the ball there. And this is a very interesting discussion that I've had with my kids and other young people and colleagues of all ages and from all walks of life, is that we're pushing a narrative of outrage, right? And
that's what well said.
And contempt for our fellow man based on what they look like, right? Not who they are, but based on what they look like. And what this does is it causes mental illness. It causes emotional unrest.
That's the conversation I want to have. And I think it's the most productive to talk about it. Yeah, we're not going to solve the problems, but at least we can have a civil conversation about things that are happening that don't support themselves with data or math.
Yep.
Yet we're all supposed to just kind of buy into this lie. And in order to be a good student, sit on our hands and not say anything. Bullshit.
Or outrage is encouraged. You get kudos for being outraged and angry and mad and argumentative and contemptuous. That's a powerful stance to take.
Yeah, let's say that's a good point. Let's talk about that, right? So what's the difference between buying into what everybody else thinks is that what everybody's now jumping for attention to dogpile on the issue to feel like you're part of the tribe? How do you even have an opinion that's against somebody else without being completely attacked?
Okay, well, this seems like a pretty good place to end this conversation. This is an episode that is 2 parts, and in order to hear the second part of this conversation, you got to tune into season 2, episode 1. And Jim, I had a blast recording this stuff with you and talking with you, and thank you for sharing all the personal stuff. And boy, I'm looking forward to next season.
I did as well, Mark, and thank you for sharing some of your personal stories. It's our hope that our listeners benefit from that and join us in season 2.
Hope to see you then.